We've done over 125 episodes here at Bootstrap MD, and I thought I saw everything under the sun. But this is one interview where it really took a right turn, and I think in a good way. You see, my next guest is an expert on money matters. She is a financial coach that works with women physicians, and you can also find her on our Physician Coaches platform. And we certainly cover some of these topics that you're about to hear on this interview. However, and I think really important to you entrepreneurs out there, we talk about her successful coaching practice, how she actually left a full-time practice, and actually the nuts and bolts of how she was able to take what was just an idea and then turn it into a full-fledged successful coaching practice. If you're a coach right now or you aspire to be a coach, I think you're going to get a lot out of this interview. My talk with Dr. Bonnie Koo on this episode of Bootstrap MD. So here joining us on the program today is Dr. Bonnie Koo. You best know her as WealthyMomMD. She's a board-certified dermatologist. She used to work for Morgan Stanley. She is majored in biochem at Barnard College. I'm curious how often you use biochemistry these days. But anyway, you best know her as the Wealthy Mom MD, and I'm so glad to finally get her on the show. Bonnie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing so great. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Well, you're a powerhouse, I think, in terms of financing, and especially when it comes to women physicians. But I'm sure when you were in medical school, you didn't say and put down my 10-year goal is to design the Wealthy Mom MD program and empower many women physicians when it comes to finances. So how did this all begin for you?
That's funny. It definitely was not in the plan at all. And I think I know you're in the entrepreneur world. It's a lot of these things were never planned, right? We kind of started noticing a problem, noticed that we had a solution or that we could help people. And that's kind of how it was born. So that is kind of my story. And it's funny because my first job out of residency, it was a new dermatology department in New York. And so what that meant was I didn't have a lot of patients, which meant I had a lot of free time, which meant I spent a lot of time on Facebook, specifically Facebook groups. That was it was just starting to blow up, Facebook groups. And then I was finding all these physician specific groups. And I actually found myself in a few women physician specific groups. And there's actually one for finances. It was just a community group. And like I said, a lot of free time. And so I started answering everyone's questions. And then people always ask, well, how did you learn this stuff? And it's not like I knew this stuff. And even though I worked at Morgan Stanley, I worked in IT. I wasn't in the banking side. So I didn't learn it there. In fact, I was a hot mess when it came to money back then. I always ran out of money every paycheck. And so I started learning about money just sort of on my own. The last year of residency, I started reading books. The White Coat Investor book was the sort of the first, foray into that. And then started answering questions. People started tagging me on posts. And the next thing you know, I started a blog. Actually, a friend of mine suggested I started a blog. And I remember thinking, why would I start a blog? The White Coat Investor has a blog already. Because in my mind, someone else was already doing it and he's
Right.
answering. In my mind, I was like, well, he already writes about everything. And I really had no desire to start a business. I was still thinking, I was just doing this kind of for fun. I really enjoyed answering people's questions and educating them. But as you probably know, Mike, people tend to ask the same questions over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
And so I thought, you know what, maybe I will start a blog so that I can write a post about specific topics. And I basically picked the topics based on what people were asking on those groups. And then I would just post a link. So it was kind of easier. Instead of like me typing this whole long thing in a Facebook post, I was able to just be like, hey, read this blog post. I wrote it. And so that was in 2017-ish, I think, when that started. And it was kind of just a hobby, to be honest, at that point.
And then you were working in the dermatology department. I assume they started to give you more patients. But when did you decide to say, I'm doing this blog, I'm doing this on the side. When do you think I could turn this into a business?
So I never asked myself that question. But what happened was I started going to conferences and meeting people. So I met Peter Kim of Passive Income MD. I met Dr. Jim Dolly, the White Coat Investor. I went to his conference and I was a speaker at his first conference.
Hmm.
And then I started going to a conference called FinCon. I don't know if you're familiar. It's an
Yes.
annual conference. I think it's September-ish for anyone in the financial media world. So financial advisors, bloggers, etc. So I started attending those meetings again, just sort of for the camaraderie, to be honest. There's something kind of fun about, and the physician group, the first year I was there was like 10, 20 people. And this included bloggers and groupies, I guess, so to speak, fans of the bloggers. And then every year it would grow and bigger and bigger. And so I was just kind of doing it for the fun and for the connection. And then what
Sure.
happened was, I think it was after I had Jack or right before I had Jack. No, it was after I had Jack. And I had some pretty bad postpartum anxiety. And I think the blog went dark for like 3 months because, I just had a baby. And I was very confused. I was like, what should I do with this? Like, why am I doing this? And I'd moved on to a private practice job at that point. I mean, the beauty of dermatology is full time is 4 days a week. So I never worked more than 4 days a week. And they were pretty short, regular days. And I remember asking Peter Kim, like, I don't know what to do because it was kind of, I thought this wasn't like a specific crossroads, but at least in my mind it was. I was like, if I'm going to do something, I should figure this out or I should just let it die and just go back to my regular life. And so that was the crossroads that I had, entered. And I remember Peter Kim he said, go big or go home is what he said. And like,
Typical
he said it in
Peter.
a very nice way. He's like, if you're going to do it, do it. Otherwise, see you later, you know?
Right, right. He's just a bundle of energy, though. He loves when he meets someone like that, and he's got that energy and that entrepreneurial drive. So,
Yeah.
that definitely was the right person to talk to at that time for you. It sounds
Yeah,
like.
and then I started working with a coach, and then that's when I basically was like, okay, I'm gonna go for it, and I didn't have a specific reason. I think I was like, why not? And
Hmm.
I just thought it would be kind of a fun new adventure.
And how's the adventure so far?
It's honestly exceeded all of my expectations and more. Like I didn't really have expectations. I don't think I really understood what it meant to have a business or even to be an entrepreneur. Like that word wasn't in my vocabulary in terms of things I could be when I grow up. Like it never occurred to me that I could be an entrepreneur. And I say this to when I meet sort of new early on physician or any entrepreneur because everyone has sort of like imposter syndrome about it. And I remember being in medical school and I felt like there were two types of people. We were all obviously smart enough to get into med school, but I felt like there was a group of people that were like really smart. And what I meant by really smart was like they were creative. They were the types of people who are going to invent things, right? Because obviously there's lots of innovation in medicine. And so I just consider myself like I'm just a regular physician, which is totally fine, right? It's still a pretty good gig. But I remember just thinking like, oh, that's not available to me. I just assumed I wouldn't ever become someone like that, which is kind of funny looking back now. And when I talk to people about that, because I think people think like you either have it or you don't.
So, many physicians come up to me and very similar story like you. They'll get on some Facebook group. They love to post. They love to help people. But then there comes that switch where you say, I've got information that I can help other people, and I feel I could charge for that. When did that happen for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started working with a coach, Sunny Smith. I know you know her. And we were creating an income goal. So the year I worked with her, I think I made it was between $35,000 and $40,000 that year. And she asked me, how much money do you want to make the following year being 2019? And I said, oh, 100K sounds nice. And at this point, I was thinking, I'm going to start a business, but like, I'm not, the idea of like leaving medicine or working less in medicine
Right.
didn't occur to me. So I'm thinking 100K, like, that's pretty cool for like a little side gig, right? And I remember she said, that's not high enough. And I remember being like, what do you mean it's not high enough? Like 35 to 100K, that's a pretty good jump. And her reasoning was, and she's not so fixated on the number, but she said, if you pick 100 when you're already at 40, she basically said, you just have to do more of the same. And so she says, you have to pick at least 200K. And then I remember my eyes like popped open and I was like, well, if that's the lowest I could pick, I guess I'll pick 200K. And in terms of monetizing it, because then people ask, well, how did you make money up to that point? It was basically sponsorships and speaking fees at that point,
Mm.
and some affiliate marketing as well. And when I worked with Sunny, we were talking about, well, how will I create that income? So she's, I think you should create a course. And so 2019 is what I call like my intern year of entrepreneurship. I basically took all the courses, Mike. So I took, I mean, you probably know these courses, B School with Marie Forleo.
Sure.
I did, and I did it through Amy Porterfield. I basically did everything through Amy. So I took her email list building course.
I've been to your website and I definitely see that Amy Porterfield influence.
Yeah. And I
And she's
took,
great. He's one I love to model.
yeah. And then I took Tribe by Stu McLaren,
Sure.
membership guy, even though I don't have a membership. And I went to a Kajabi conference where I got to see sort of the big names in entrepreneurship, on stage, just talk about all the aspects of marketing, online biz, met with people. It's so fun to meet other entrepreneurs, Mike. And then at the Kajabi conference, I forget, there were hundreds of people in the room and less than 5 physicians. As far as I know, there could have been more,
Yeah.
but like it was just fun to meet people who aren't physicians all building businesses. And then I'm like, oh, it's not that weird to do, or not weird, but
Right.
it's not that like,
Yeah, it's when I would go to conferences and when we are physicians, we kind of gravitated to each other. But it's so much difference when I have to go to like a conference for like, a CME requirement. And, a lot of those obstacles, that those self-limiting beliefs that we often see at, how can I do this? How can I add this, do this thing in medicine? You don't have the same thing when you go to these business conferences. I'm sure that when somebody's talked to you, it's like 200K, what are you talking about? That maybe you had some self-limiting beliefs there. You didn't even know it, because it sounds like you're doing it because it's not really financial. You're not doing it. You've already got a practice, a thriving practice going, and money didn't seem like a big motivator for you.
to start the business, you mean?
Yeah.
No, it's funny. Like it's a bit more on the radar now because now that I do it full time. But when I was starting it, it was looking back, like I wasn't thinking so much about the money. I just was interested in learning how, like, the mechanics of building a business was really interesting. And it still is. I love talking about business, like business coaching. I don't do that like in terms of my offerings, but I love talking business with other entrepreneurs. Like I just find it super interesting and fascinating. And so I really enjoyed learning how to create an online business like that. Yet, that, like I said, that year immersion in all things business. So that was really fun to me. Like it was, when I think about it, it was kind of crazy because I was doing that while I was working full time.
Wow.
Remember when you could practice medicine on your own terms? What if you could take control of your physician career, make more money while working smarter, not harder? Pick up your copy of The Positioned Physician. Earn more, work smart, and love medicine again. Now updated for 2021, The Positioned Physician details one doctor's journey from burnt-out employee to successful entrepreneur. Whether you are in residency, in mid-career, or close to retirement, after reading The Positioned Physician, you'll gain the knowledge that can strategically impact your doctor life. The Positioned Physician, now available on Amazon Kindle and paperback.
So where are you right now in terms? You said your coaching business is now full time. Are you still seeing patients?
No, I stopped seeing patients in person actually when the pandemic started. And that wasn't on purpose. Basically, I left private practice and I actually switched to locums, which gave me more flexibility in my schedule. So I was kind of working, a few weeks on, few weeks off, that sort of thing. And so I thought that would be just a better way to handle my time. Plus, I got to travel to really cool places. Like I was in Hawaii for the winter, for example. But then when I returned from my last locums assignment was actually the end of February 2020. And so we know what happened in March. And the plan was to find a local part-time job in New
Yeah.
Jersey or New York City. And that didn't happen because of the pandemic. And so I was like, okay, I'll just work on my business full-time instead. And I was doing some telederm too at the same time. That was super part-time though. And when jobs were becoming available again, it was before the vaccine was available. And I
Mhm.
think I just was like, no thanks. And had
Wow.
really no desire to go back. And plus with the the lack of vaccination at the time, I just figured, why should I risk my health, not just mine,
Right.
but like exposing my family if I don't have to? And so I haven't looked back. I mean, it's interesting. It's not something I thought I would ever do. Like, I wasn't one of those people who was feeling really burned out about medicine or, itching to leave. It's not something I'd ever thought I was due. But now that it's been close to a year, I miss certain aspects of it. I think I just miss being with other physicians, but I have that
Right.
through my business.
Right.
And
Right.
what I like even more is that I get to talk to all physicians, not just dermatologists. So that's, to me, that's really fun.
So I'm really fascinated by this because I love seeing your journey and how you kind of evolved in this. So what's a typical day in the life of Dr. Bonnie Koo?
So I'm trying to think. Do I have a set schedule? There's somewhat of a schedule. I mean, I would say that the best thing about doing this full time now is I don't set an alarm clock anymore in the
Mm,
morning because like I
yes.
don't have to like get ready to go to work. I naturally wake up between 7 and 8. So this morning I woke up at 7 a.m., for example. So usually between 7 and 7:30. And I generally don't schedule any calls until the afternoon. And there are certain days where I don't schedule any calls. And so I would say I like quote unquote get to work between 9 and 10 a.m. That's when I start. And I generally end by 4 or 5. And I guess I technically work 5 days a week, but 2 days are like half days. When I say off, it just means I'm not like actively working on the business, but I'll be working out or doing something else instead.
And then of course you got your family obligations. I guess we gotta fit those in too.
Yeah, I have a toddler and he goes to preschool. And, my partner, Matt, he does all the driving to and from school. So that's really nice. And
Love it. Love
and
it.
most of the grocery shopping and all that kind of fun stuff.
So when the pandemic hit, you mentioned prior to this, your revenue was basically sponsorship and speaking gigs. I assume the speaking gigs kind of dried up, obviously. And then was that replaced by your coaching program, or were you doing one-on-one coaching at the time, or do you do group coaching? How does it break
Yeah.
down now, I guess?
So in 2019, I created my program, Money for Women Physicians. And that's a digital course at the time. Now it's a program, and I'll tell you the difference in a second. And then I started one on one coaching in 2020. And so now my revenue is, I don't know the exact breakdown, but it's mostly from the program, which includes group coaching and then one on one clients as well. Speaking definitely dried up in the pandemic. I think of speaking not so much as a revenue maker for me, but more as a way to
Lead
market
generator,
myself.
sure.
Yeah, like a lead generator and just to kind of get my name out, that sort of thing. That's how I think about speaking. And so that's why like negotiating speaking fees, like I do have like a minimum, but I'm pretty flexible because I don't think of it so much as a way to get paid. I think of it more as a way to get my name out there. And so, yeah, so programs and coaching. And then the difference between a course and a program, in my mind, at least, is the course had a start and an end date. When I say start and end date, I mean a start and end date for the live support, like weekly calls or a Facebook group or something like that. And now it's an ongoing program, which is kind of it's like a hybrid between a course and a membership. Basically, they pay one fee, and it's like a course in that they get the course, but the live access doesn't stop. It's ongoing. And so when people buy my program, they get the whole course at once and they can consume it like Netflix. They can binge it or they can take their time. And there's a weekly call, usually with me once a week. And that is lifetime access, meaning like it doesn't end. It'll end when the program, I guess, ends, but I have no plans to end that program. And then the Facebook group as well is ongoing. And so I think it's an amazing deal since
And
you
it's
get,
your life, not their life.
yeah. So, yeah, so that's the program. And then I take a limited number of one on one clients as well.
Wow. Now, one of the things that really, you know, new coaches and even older coaches have problems with is pricing. You know, am I pricing myself? Is it too expensive? What will people think? And oftentimes they just end up pricing it so so low that it really devalues it. Did you have issues with that in terms of pricing your programs and your one-on-one coaching?
I'm smiling. I know people can't see that unless they watch the video because when I initially started my course in 2019, in my mind, I was like, well, this is like the beta group. This is like the founding member launch. You've heard that term before, right? And so I remember Sunny was my coach for all of 2019 and part of 2020. And I think I wanted to price it at something like $200. So it was something like that. And the reason why I
Yeah.
picked that was I think I picked the price that Jim Dolly picked for his course. Although his course I think is actually 400 or 500. But it was
Yeah.
basically I picked a low $100 range.
But
And I
he doesn't
remember,
do any, I don't think he does any like live interaction.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
remember when I told Sunny the price I wanted to pick, what it was like $200 or $300. She was like, I could see like the
He hung
steam
up
coming
on
out of
you.
her ears. She's like, "What are you talking about?" Anyway, so I think you're right. I think we're afraid to charge, And I think what helps is because I actually was coaching someone on pricing. It's good to kind of look at. Ultimately, you get to charge whatever you want, but I think it's good to do a little quote unquote market research, just kind of see examples, just to kind of see what the rate. But there's always going to be a range. So anyway, I settled on $1,000 for the first time I offered my program. Now it's $2,500. That's what I charge.
Wow.
I think pricing drama is always a thing, even for my one-on-one coaching. I mean, I went through many iterations. I actually started at $6K for 3 months, and then I actually lowered it to $6K for 6 months. And again, I remember Sunny being really
Yeah.
like, why would you do that? And now I charge more. But yeah, pricing, I think it's interesting. And because I coach on money specifically, the person I was coaching the other day was a new coach, and I said, people never say no because of the money. Like they might say that's the reason, like, oh, it's too expensive. That's
Right.
never the real reason people don't pay. It's because they don't see the value. They don't understand the return on that investment.
Yeah. And that's often a reflection of, the coach, because we haven't marketed our course appropriately. So that's where they're having the disconnect.
Marketing, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure you found that the higher you charge, I just tend to have a better experience with a client or a better client.
Yeah. So actually, I'm in a business mastermind now, and we all have found that it's much easier to sell more expensive things than lower expensive things. What I mean by that is selling a program, which is generally the lowest price of your offerings, is actually much harder to sell than a high-end one-on-one coaching package. Like I've definitely found that to be true to some extent. And it's funny because I started with the program and then moved to coaching, like one-on-one or high touch coaching. Most coaches start with one-on-one coaching and then scale to a course or membership. And so it's a different type of marketing.
So what's coming in the future? I understand you got a book coming out probably later in the year. What other things are coming for WealthyMomMD?
Yeah, so my book's coming out this fall of 2021, and it's funny because I think that's the first thing I wanted to write. Like when I first started all of this, like I even had a proposal written up and a table of content. This was going to be more of a financial literacy book, and now the book is a coaching, a money mindset book instead. And so it's been fun to finally make this a reality. It's kind of been on my bucket list for years at this point.
I think too, it for me, it makes it like more legit for yourself. Like my parents didn't really care that I had a coaching business, but then when I came out with a book, it's like, oh, my son finally made it.
Well, I think that's I think what you're saying is true. I think a book definitely gives you that, what's the word? Not recognition, establishes you as an expert in your field. Being an author still has that sort of panache, right? Rather than I have a website, because everyone can make a website these days. Everyone can offer one-on-one coaching, but to write a book it's a big undertaking.
I know, and it's funny. It's like most of my one-on-one coaching clients have never read my book, even though some of the things that I take from a book are in. I share with my one-on-one coaching clients, and I think it's the greatest lead generator out there. You can sell it on Amazon, and Amazon in its own is its own. You'll find people that you never would have thought of reached. You can get more speaking gigs. There's so many things that you can do with a book. I love how this discussion, because I love like you're sharing all of this, how you got started with your coaching business. Okay, and the last question: 3 books you'd recommend that you've read.
Fiction.
It doesn't matter how that either influenced your life and
Yeah.
got you to be the Wealthy Mom MD.
So I actually don't read a lot of books, but I can think of 3. I'm actually looking at my bookcase right now. So I actually really like Marie Forleo's book, Everything is Figure Outable.
I love that title, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that book is just all things mindset coaching. Like it is basically, and that's what I love about books because they're accessible price wise, right? And so I like that book a lot, even though I kind of like knew everything in the book, so to speak. But it's always good to hear it from another person's perspective. I'm trying to think what else. Actually, I just read a parenting book recently that I love, and I've been telling everyone about it. It's called The Conscious Parent by Dr. Shafali. It is so good, and it's the punchline is basically to really allow your kids to be who they are. And I think like if you think of like just letting them be who they are and not trying to, not that parents are actively trying to diminish their kids, but a lot of times we want them to be a certain way.
Sure.
But, you know, we all kind of come out with everything we need and all the
Immigrant parents. I can tell you a lot about this.
Yeah. So it's just been a really eye-opening book.
Yeah.
Just to basically, we have to do our own inner work to be great parents, to just allow them to be who they are. So I just, you know, Jack's 3.5, but you know, these are things I'm thinking about. So that's book number 2. Let's see, book number 3. I really like the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And I think that's mainly women read it. I liked it for a few reasons. One is it is nonfiction, but it's written as a series of short little stories. So some of the chapters are really short, some are longer, but they're kind of stories and lessons from her life. And it was just a really great way to learn about her sort of journey and the way she talks about it. So I like that book. So those are my 3.
Okay, so that's Everything is Figure Outable, Untamed, and The Conscious Parent or Conscious Parenting. The Conscious Parent. Now, we really haven't talked too much about your expertise, which is helping with female physicians with finances. What are the biggest obstacles female physicians have when it comes to money and money management?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to answer that question. I think the obstacle, and this isn't specific towards female physicians per se, I think it's for all women. But if you just think about the way we are socialized, and I think that this is like a female specific thing, the way we're socialized around money as a woman, and then because we're all physicians, there's like another layer of socialization, meaning we don't like to think about we're helping people and getting paid to help people. Like there's this kind of like guilt and maybe even shame around that a little bit. And then as most women kind of ignore the money, especially if they have a male partner, because it's still a thing where the male spouse will handle the finances and not the woman. That's definitely changing. Plus, women don't have as many examples of rich women as men do. You know, and so if I asked you, Mike, to close your eyes and think of a rich person, what would that person look like? Martha Stewart. Well, people usually think of an old white man, right?
Oh,
and
yeah,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. And so,
yeah,
because
Elon Musk.
all the examples we have of, there's obviously wealthy women, but there aren't that many. And then also women, we feel guilty about money. You know, if a woman, you know, in the entrepreneur world, people are very transparent about money, right? That's kind of one of the great things about entrepreneurship. But women feel like they have to justify why they want to make more money. Themselves, they feel like they need a reason. Yeah. And if they say it sort of like publicly, other women will often chime in like, why do you want to make that much? But if I said it to a man, they'd be like, cool. That's just an example. Like it's kind of a stereotype. Yeah. So there's a lot of sort of barriers to that. So women, I think a lot of us will even say, I hear what a lot of women say, like, well, money's not that important, or I don't need that much money. Like, well, that kind of language is used a lot. So I know that was kind of a lot of different answers to your question, but those are the types of barriers that I see. Plus, a lot of women really don't think they can make that much money. Because I ask this question in my group from time to time, how much money do you want to make? Like, and I have them write a number, I guess like an annual salary, whatever. And there's a range of numbers. They starts at 200, then goes up to over 1 million, but it's always, they say the number, then there's a but afterwards. Number, but I don't want to work that much. Number, but I only work part-time, so I don't know if I could really make that. Because most of us have conflated money with time. Like if you work part-time, that means you have to make less.
Interestingly enough, though, in terms of like entrepreneurship, at least when it comes to physicians, I would say the majority are women.
I have no idea, actually. That'd be an interesting survey.
I don't know if you noticed that. At least what I see in terms of the space that we're in.
Maybe. I haven't even thought about that, to be honest. It'd be interesting to, because I think there's a lot of, and you probably know more than I do, Mike. I think there's a lot of physician entrepreneurs that I'm not even aware about because they don't hang out with other
Right.
physician entrepreneurs. They're like doing their own thing, which is great, right? So I think there's a lot more out there than we
Yeah,
think.
I think if I was to pinpoint it, I think in terms of like the physician slash entrepreneur slash influencer
Hmm.
space, like becoming a coach or becoming a consultant, or I tend to see more women in that. I don't know why. Yeah,
For coach in the coaching world, I think for sure.
yeah, yeah. And so tell us about your successes because I know you've done a lot of coaching, and I always love to hear about like the successes that you've done because that's what drives you. That's what drives your business. Tell us about the students and how you've helped them.
Yeah, it's so fun to see before and afters. And what I mean by that is what's nice now is because I started my program in 2019, so now it's 2021. So now I can really see where the people were in 2019 and where they are now. And there's one person a few people that come to mind, but one person in particular I remember because I remember like being on calls with her in 2019, and she was completely new to money. Like that, she had a financial advisor, she's married, she has kids, and just let the advisor handle everything and knew very little about money in general. 2 years later, now she's invested in multiple real estate investments and is actually an entrepreneur now too. Like she's creating a product, a digital product, an app actually. And then so a lot of my clients will invest in real estate because that's a natural vehicle for wealth building, right? Besides the stock market. And so some of them have become coaches and entrepreneurs. Not everyone does, but a lot of them. It's interesting, right? Because now that I've really transitioned to mindset coaching more than strategy coaching, it's just really amazing. It's just even in physicians, how we really limit the way we practice and live. Let me give you an example. I think a lot of us subscribe to, okay, I'll get a job. And even that's like a relatively recent thing because there was a time, as I'm sure you know, where most doctors started their own practice, but now it's most
Yeah,
doctors get a job. So I think most people sort of who graduate a little bit later, I'll get a job and then I'll work for 30, 40 years and then I'll retire. Like that's just what we've subscribed to. And I think people are starting to question that. So my clients question that mainly because they're under, I coach them. And so it's like, why you don't have to accept that as the way to live your life. And I think it's like people should start thinking like, who made this up? Like who, like this whole like full-time versus part-time. Like I actually looked into it, Mike, and it's from the Industrial Revolution. This whole like 40-hour work week, Monday through Friday it's all made up. And but like most of society subscribes to it. So like for example, like today's a Tuesday, right? And I at 12 o'clock, my partner and I went outside. We live in a high-rise building. We have a large amenities deck with barbecue grills and pool, and we went to grill. We grilled lunch and sort of hung out
yeah.
in the sun. I was gonna go for a swim, but I had to come back to talk with you, Mike. So
Well, this has been an illuminating time, and I really commend you at what you've done. You probably don't see yourself like this, but you really are one of the pioneers who kind of helped, pay it forward and now spring other people to starting up their own business. And I love that you gave us insight about your business because I think that will really elucidate and help others to get in the space. And I love it. Where can they go if someone wants to work with you? What's the best place to go to contact you?
yeah, everything is WealthyMomMD. So wealthymomd.com. That's at WealthyMomMD for Instagram, and so they can find me there.
All right. And I'm curious. So I know you didn't really answer the first question is where you came up the name Wealthy Mom MD. When did you feel like,
Oh,
you could actually do it? Because a long time ago, I bought the domain name
oh, that's a good one.
millionaireMD.com and I
You still
used
own
that
it?
as a goal for me. And I got my first million in my early 30s. Did you have the domain name before you actually, had your successful business as a way of motivating yourself, or you just said, this is who I am and that's what I'm going to declare to the world?
No, so my business started out as Miss Bonnie MD.
Ah,
MISS Bonnie MD. I was like, I'll just pick that. I bought that domain. That was the blog. And I after a few years I hired a professional web designer and we were still going to use Miss Bonnie MD, and that's, I think at some point during the design process, and this was like, and branding, I was like, I think I should change the name, because Miss Bonnie MD is like, doesn't really like say anything about
Right.
what I do. And I spent some time brainstorming names. Like, actually, one of the names was Rich Bitch MD. And I bought that domain name because I was like, this is so fun. I own it, but I don't think I'm going to do anything with it. And I think
You
Wealthy
never
Mom
know.
MD, yeah, Wealthy Mom MD, won out finally. And it's funny because I don't know if I thought of it as like, am I the Wealthy Mom MD or is that my client? And I think to this day I don't really define that, but I guess
Right.
it doesn't really matter. It's an aspirational brand name is kind of how I think about it. And
Yeah.
then no,
And
I bought the domain name afterwards and it was available. So
right. Obviously, we attribute it to money, but wealth could mean a whole bunch of different things,
yeah.
not just financial. So, thank you again, Dr. Bonnie Koo. I know you've got some barbecuing or something or swimming you got to do, and I really appreciate the time. Go check out her website, WealthyMomMD.com. She's got some courses. I know right now you do some group coaching. It's closed right now, but there's some contact information. Whenever it opens up, you guys want to know how to get access to that. So again, Bonnie, thanks again for joining us on the program, and I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. This is fun.
Hey, Dr. Mike Lumeng for Bootstrap MD. Thanks for listening to the program. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I encourage you to go and please leave and rate or review this podcast to wherever you're listening to it. It really helps me out, and it really helps me spread the benefits of physician entrepreneurship. Really appreciate it, and thanks again for listening.